Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 8th of May 2024. May, where did April go? Welcome to the show, and we're coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7URP. Lovely to see you. On tonight's show, Jim G3YLA is here to give us an update on Sporadic and answer your questions live. We have club news and pictures for you. And we find out what on earth this is. And it's a month since we met, believe it or not. But we asked this, and we had several in the last couple of days come in, solutions. But do you know what that is? If you do, pop it onto BATC or Facebook, and we'll be sure to read them out with the other answers. But first, as I said a moment ago, NARC Live is back. It's lovely to be back. It is a month since we did this, so if we get anything wrong, you'll understand why. Of course, most of our talks have been delivered online, in fact, since March 2020, since COVID, of course. And the committee felt, really, that we should try some in-person meetings at CNS, some talks at CNS, to see how many people would come to those and if that's the way we should be going for the future. So it was kind of an experiment, really. We did a talk with Steve from South Africa. That came in, of course, live as a link into the audience, and then we had Steve G3YLA giving a talk on Mamanagel just 2 weeks ago today. To be honest, we had almost exactly the same number of people come for as we have at meetings now, which is around about 30. In fact, we had 32 at Steve's talk, and we had 32 in the informal week the week after. So it tells us, for you, the members, which is what we do this for, that maybe you still like to have your talks online. But of course, that decision will be yours. We've tried it now. We've tried both ways, both bringing remote guests in and also an in-person guest talk. But the decision, as they say, will be yours. And I remind you that at the end of this month, on the 29th of May, we're going to be doing what we hope is a hybrid meeting, where we're going to be at CNS for all those that can make it there. And also there'll be some online as well. There'll be people online as well, and I hope that we'll hear from you there. So that's on the 29th of May, something to look forward to. We'd love to hear what you think, particularly about this, because it matters so much. You know, half the club's activity, more or less, is having talks on specialist subjects, and we'd really like to know how they'd like to be delivered to you in the future. So please be thinking about that. But it is good to be back. And by the way, in 2 weeks' time as well, there'll be another talk online here on NARC Live, and that's from Tony K8ZT, who's going to be giving us, or ZT, I guess he'd rather be known as, and he's giving us a whole series of talks on beginning with HF, so that's something to look forward to. Now on to other club news, and this Saturday it's our monthly sked with our friends at Koblenz, the twin city, of which we are twinned also with their radio club. And this is, as usual, from 10 AM local time, 7.123 megs, or a local talking on 145.250 megs FM as well. So I hope a lot of you will be there. Everybody's welcome. Now, another thing that's big in the calendar, and we were able to bring back last year after a couple of years break because of COVID, is Radioactive. There's nothing radiating about it, though, radiation, except some hopefully good operating and some fun. And it's something that we do at Tammy and my place here in Great Ellingham. It's on the 1st and 2nd of June this year. Here we are, as a slide with some pictures made up, I think, of last year's, Tammy, or the last couple of years?
A few years ago.
Yeah. So there we are. There's some slides to let you know what sort of things happening. Now, we've got lots of activities and things for you. Of course, the major things that we're going around is National Field Day, which is a CW contest that happens on the first weekend of June every year. And that's why we picked this weekend to do it. But don't worry, if you can't do CW and you want to get involved with contesting, there'll be a 6-metre SSB station as well running on the field opposite. Plus, of course, here at DCP, we'll be having lots of activities and workshops, especially the sort of thing you can't do at the school with just a couple of hours, and that's the key thing. There'll be a studio tour again, because it was so popular last year, we couldn't believe that they would have so many people interested to see where we do this NARC Live, where we're talking to you now. So we're going to do another one or maybe even 2 of those, because they were both full last time when we had too many people really in this room for people to see what we're doing. It's free to all members of NARC. It's all part of your membership. And we'll be doing Sunday Roast Yeah?
Yep.
Tammy, on the Sunday as well, roast rolls for everybody as well on site. And if you're here really early on the Saturday, you'll even get breakfast rolls, bacon baps as well. But we are looking for any other ideas and talks and a workshop or something. So if there is something that you can do, just being told a moment ago by Jim of an exciting talk that his brother Dick is going to bring us on the new QCX, which will be lovely on the Saturday. But we'd love to hear from you if you'd like anything particular for us to arrange. There'll be a booking form which I hope to finish with a outline timetable in time for next Wednesday's meeting at CNS, when I'll be giving them out. Plus, of course, we'll be putting them as a PDF on the newsletter as well, and you've got a chance to order some components and tools and things that we should do every year as well as a sort of service to getting bits and pieces which you maybe not find so easy to get nowadays. So all that's to come, but just to put it in your diary, 1st and 2nd of June for Radioactive number 15, believe it or not. Now, just to tell you about a couple of other things, excuse me. This Monday, we've got a Tonight at 8 presentation, which, as you probably know, Tammy and I host for the RSGB. But this one really might be of interest to you, especially if you like making things, because this one is all about making and designing circuit boards with KiCad PCB design software. Now, years and years ago, when I started making circuit boards, you used ferric chloride and you used pens. Trying to remember the name of a pen that we used, and there was Alphac transfers and everything like that. Well, PCBs aren't done like that anymore, especially when it gets to double-sided. And there's lots of cheap places that you can just email a file to make your circuit boards, and they're really very, very good and very professional. But they need to be in electronic form. It's no good drawing them now. Wish I could think of the name of that pen. Maybe Jim will know later on. There's a pen that you used which was etch resistant. Anyway, if you want to know how to use this free, wonderful software called KiCad, how to design a PCB, Mike Willis, G0MJW, will be presenting this on Monday night live, and you can watch it on the RSGB's YouTube channel, or full details from rsgb.org/webinars. Looking forward to that. Now, another couple of initiatives that are happening. You may have seen, if you're on Facebook in particular, a group of amateurs who are trying to promote us to make more use of 2 meters. It's called 145 Alive. If you have a look on Facebook, you'll see this, and this is telling you when the next one is. This is really just to try and get a bit more activity on 2 meters, not just the repeater stuff that we all hear. So the next one coming up is this Saturday, the 11th of May, between 1 and 3 p.m. 2 meters FM, apart from that, all over the place. So if you like 2 meters, whether you're working from home or portable or mobile, this is for you. And if you're on Facebook, you have a look for that and search for that. You can follow it to find out when they do various events. Let's hope it helps to bring that band alive. And finally, on club news, one thing you may have noticed if you've been to any of the meetings recently at CNS, we've had a sort of informal exchanges of goods, people basically bringing stuff for free that people can help themselves to and share. And it did seem to be a good idea. And a couple of you actually wrote to me and said this would be a good thing we could do regularly. And of course we can. So we're going to put a table out at CNS when we meet there, roughly every other week. And if you've got something to give a new life to, upcycling I think is the modern phrase for it, and something that you just want to give, or maybe a few quid for, although we're not trying to make this a big sale that's every meeting. It's mainly for things that are free, to give them a new life. Then why not bring them along to that table, and people can grab them, whether they're books, maybe cables, cases, all sorts of things that you think might be useful to another amateur. I think it's a good thing to do.
We've had 2 people come in. It's a Dalo pen, or Dalo.
Dalo, that's
Dalo.
right. Thank you very much. God, there's people watching. Brilliant. Dalo pen. I couldn't remember the name of it. And
although Bruce G4KZT said your mum's nail varnish worked too.
Oh yeah, that was an acetone-based thing, wasn't it? I think, yeah. That if you, but you'd look a bit silly trying to design a circuit board with a what's the name thing, a nail brush. It'd be a bit chunky lines, wouldn't they? But those were the days. My first ones were designed with, as well as those transfers, we used crepe tape. I remember very, very narrow tape, just to make one-off circuit boards. But the trouble is, once you'd made one and etched it, that was it. You could never reuse all that design. Whereas if you did it photographically and then expose the PCB. Anyway, I don't know what I'm telling you about this. Have a look on Monday. I'm sure Mike will tell us exactly how to use this wonderful free KiCad software.
He's not going to show you how to put tape on, though.
He's not going to show us how to do that. He's going to do it the modern way, where you'll be able to email the file to a manufacturer and they'll make you a lovely circuit board and it'll turn up in a week or two. Really, really good. Now, on to members' news. And a couple of you have written to us with some news. And you may know that Mills on the Air weekend is coming up this weekend. It's that sort of time of year now when things start getting brighter. And Gordon, G3PXT, he's going to operate Horsted Mill from 10 AM this Saturday the 11th and Sunday the 12th of May. And for as long as, I asked him how long you'll be operating for, and he said for as long as the battery lasts, which I think he thinks is about 6 hours. So there we are. Now that, I looked into this because I thought, I don't know where Horsted Mill is. I've never been.
Really?
No, do you know?
I've been paddling in there.
Paddling, yeah, but is there? This is all that's left of the mill, isn't it?
There. Yeah, there's some horrible riptides there, I think. Or, current.
And if you Google or whatever browser you use, Horsted Mill, you'll see wonderful pictures of what this really grand old mill from years ago. This is about all that's left now.
There's nothing really there now.
Except you paddling in the water.
Yeah.
Well, see what the temperature's going to be like first. Anyway, there we are. That's the 11th and 12th of May. We wish Gordon well. I asked him if he wanted any help. He said, well, he thinks he can do it himself, but he would love a bit of support, you know, and occasionally come along, just give him a break or something like that. So do try and work him on the air and go and see him if you can. This Saturday and Sunday, 11th and 12th of May. Good luck, Gordon. And one final thing now. Tom, G8XQD, says he's found randomly, I think, this thing called Weekend Music Radio. It's a private radio station, kind of, which he's heard recently around 6 megs. And then found historic recordings online. Tom thinks that this Heath Robinson cartoon will amuse the NARC team of antenna riggers. And you can find out more by web searching Weekend Music Radio. Now, some of you of a certain age, and I'm afraid that does include me, but sadly not my wife, who might remember Heath Robinson. He was well known for these wonderful pictures and captions and cartoons. It's very complex. I'll leave it there for a little while longer so you can enjoy it. But I think every radio amateur watching this, in fact, that could be me at the top there, Tammy. I've got a similar hairstyle, haven't I?
Maybe.
Could that be you in the garden complaining? Anyway, it's a lovely picture. Thank you very much for sending that to us, Tom.
There's a cat there as well.
Oh, the cat. Oh, that would suit you, wouldn't it? Yeah, the cat's by the mum. And that would be exactly how it is. Lovely stuff. Thanks very much for sending it. Do keep sending us your stories and bits and pieces like that. They really help make the show. Tammy, over to you for Little People. I've done enough
Ralph
talking.
says that's my shack.
Oh, Ralph. Okay, yeah. It's brilliant stuff.
Have you ever wondered what is underneath a microscope when you look through it?
Correcting fluid things.
No, they're organisms.
Oh, they're organisms. Do you know, that's terrible, isn't it? For me, I just took that literally, probably without thinking, and said what they were. But yes, of course. And that's going to be a little model there, isn't it, on the bottom right as well? That'll be made really small. When they made those test tubes small.
I saw on their thing earlier when I went to look. It was 13-year anniversary last month. At the end of last month.
What, the miniature dash calendar?
Yeah, it's been doing it every day for 13 years. Wow.
This is a Japanese website which we've used on, well, NARC Lives for as long as I can remember, really. Miniature-calendar.com. You'll find a different one every day, and Tammy picks one for us. That is wonderful, isn't it? How they use their ingenuity to make things up, pictures up. Brilliant. Okay, so as I said, please keep in touch. I know we haven't had NARC Live for a month, and we didn't expect to do that, by the way. It was quite a last-minute decision to move one of the talks, Steve's talk, I think, to being at the school. But we're back, and so we'll be back again in another 2 weeks, and we'd love to see what you've been up to. So pictures, stories, anything you think will be of interest to other members, we'd love to hear from you. This is the address to send them to, radio@dcpmicro.com. And remember that thing about radioactive, by the way. This is where you'll be able to see what we see here. It's not like behind. It's not quite as boring as that. There's about 6 computers here, I think, we use for this. So if you want to see how we do it, the graphics and things like that, and what we wear underneath the bottom half of us, all that sort of thing, you'll be able to see that as radioactive. So let's go back to that competition that we set a month ago now. when we asked you, what on earth is this? I did try and put some clues because we hadn't had any entries, and I remember the previous one. That was the tremolo arm that Frankie sent. That was a record. We had probably 30 entries to that. We had none for this until I put it on the newsletter again, and then we had quite a few. So let's just have a look online and make sure we don't miss anybody here.
I haven't seen any online.
No, we've got the Dalo Resist pens, which is brilliant to know that. Yeah, I haven't seen any entries here. So let's go forwards and say firstly that Steve G3YLA says, is the mystery object a centrifugal fan?
John M6JWP, is it a car heater fan?
Andrew Bracknell, sorry I don't have your call sign, Andrew. It says, I think that this may be a tweeter speaker from a PA system. Yeah, I get that. Colin
M7OPB, is it the fan blades of a car's air ventilation system?
Frankie M7EQR says, I think the what on earth item this week is some sort of siren. Get that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. John G8VPE, I think that the mystery object is a fan blade rotor from a snail fan blower, often used as a compact forced air cooling device for homebrew valve linear amplifiers.
Thank you for all those entries. And let me just have a look. No, nothing else online. So this is the reveal of what this item is. What on earth was this, Tammy?
It was a centrifugal fan.
Brilliant. Now it's easy, isn't it? When you see, they think, oh yes, I've seen one of them. I must admit, when I saw this one, I thought it was a fairly easy one to leave you with, but it clearly wasn't. So well done to all of you who got that. I think pretty much everybody got that. Maybe it isn't a tweeter, but I do get what you mean, Andrew. But everybody else there. And Frankie, I can absolutely see that probably, with the right sort of tone in front of it, would make a noise like a siren. So well done anyway, all of you, for entering that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about doing another competition then? Because we've got a great one for you here. See if you know, what on earth is this? Some of you will know. Not allowed to give a clue, am I?
No, you're not, no.
Okay. All right. Just send your answers to radio@dcpmicro.com. You've got just under 2 weeks to do it, and we'll let you know as soon as we... you'll find out what that is in 2 weeks. So I've just seen a message, actually, to be honest. Bob, G6PWS, you never got my email. I guess... Bob, you maybe, unless it's some item of news or something, maybe you entered the competition. If you did, I'm really sorry. I didn't. I went through them this afternoon, so I'm very, very sorry, Bob. But if you said it was a centrifugal fan or something like that, you're counted as well. Bob, G6PWS. I never, ever miss anybody out. Even like last time, we had to print 2 separate pages for our script with all the answers, with all the entries on there. So very sorry about that. Anyway, do let us know if you know what that item is. As I said, we'll be back in just 2 weeks' time with another NARC Live, and we'll reveal what it is. So just a time, I think, before we meet tonight's guest, to let you know what's happening this week at the club. So this coming Saturday at 10 o'clock, the Koblenz Sked on 7.123 megahertz, as I mentioned earlier, and also with a local call-in on VHF FM 145250. Sunday at 7 PM, the GB2RS News on GB3NB. On Monday at 7:30, the Monday Night Net on GB3NB, and at 8 o'clock, the 80 metre CW net on 3.543 megahertz, and also that Tonight at 8 special on how to design PCBs. Then next Wednesday, the April the 17th, we're back meeting at CNS. It's a social evening plus bright sparks for young members, and of course don't forget that show and share table if there's something that you wanted to give away particularly, then please bring it there. It's not long, by the way, till Barford, so if you've got items to sell, that'll be the next big opportunity in Norfolk. That's coming up the first week, Sunday in July. And of course, let us have your stories and all of your pictures and everything else that you've been doing, and of course we're always happy to send one of these cards out. We send one probably on average once a week to somebody. We'll add your name to ours and send it to whoever you like. Just let us know who to send it to and send it to the usual address, radio@dcpmicro.com. Now on to our main event, and I'm sure most of the amateurs will know and have heard of Sporadic E, but how much do we use it? What can it do for us, and how do we predict when it's going to happen? It's delightful to welcome back Jim G3YLA, who's going to tell us more. Hello, Jim.
Hello, David. How are you?
I'm all right. I've got something in my eye, but I'll be okay. I'm glad I'm handing over to you in a moment. How's things with you?
Yeah, good. I've just been working a couple of stations on Sporadic as you were talking, so it's all happening out there.
So we don't need a prediction or anything. It's actually happening right now.
Yeah. Bottom end of 50 megs, opening to Scandinavia. Just worked an LA and an SM. So once you get past May, you should be checking the bands, seeing what's happening. Very strong signals.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I heard it coming through then.
That's SM3 GSK, halfway up the Gulf of Bothnia. So that's on.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
I thought you were getting that well, yeah?
All right, Jim. Well, we'll leave it to you as always. For everybody at home, though, if you've got any questions about Sporadic to Jim at any time during this, or comments, or how have you worked Sporadic, how have you finding it, then obviously, as always, put them onto BATC or onto Facebook, and we'll read them to Jim at the end. But over to you, Jim.
Thank you, David. Well, good evening, everybody, and to Tammy as well, of course. This is quite a busy time of the year for me because it's it's the start of the season, and normally we think of Sporadic as running from about May through to early September. And I know the folk on FT8 will be jumping up and down saying, well, we've been working it for ages. And on the digital modes, you can extend the edges of the season by quite a bit. But for CW and SSB modes, you need signals to be a little bit stronger. But there was nothing at all wrong with that signal just now. It was, it was just peaking S9 on the meter. And that's with me using an 80-meter doublet for an antenna. So don't necessarily think you need massive great arrays. If Sporadic is there, it's there. So all good. So I'm really torn now between dashing off and so if I stop.
Not yet.
No. Well, if you hear some Morse going on, that'll be me having a QSO while you're absorbing the slides. But anyway, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a précis of what we normally look for with Sporadic and how to predict it. Some of you will have seen these before, but Sporadic is a complex subject, really, to be honest. And I have to give myself a little refresher course at the beginning of a season. And what it usually means is that it never hurts to just go over the very sort of fundamental parts of it to begin with. And it's got so many things involved with it that it's a job to know where to start. And how I got into it was starting with the bits that are supposedly related to weather, because that's my sort of other big deal that I've been involved with all my working life. So I'm happy in that world. The Sporadic world is a world that I'm relatively new to, say, since about the early 1990s, late 1980s. But since then, our knowledge generally in the amateur world has improved enormously. And it's kind of something that's improved because of the contributions of amateurs. None of this is necessarily a G3YLA thing. This is all about the usefulness of people's logs being put up on the various clusters to make it known where the bands are open at any one time, because that then enables me to go off, and others who work in propagation, to go off and look at possible connections and see if there's ways. The ultimate holy grail in this is to try and predict it. Well, that's not quite there yet, but we can sort of improve our chances by saying where we might look. Now, because I've had an immensely busy day today at work, and I'm retired, but I've had a full day at work, so I didn't get my Sporadic blog up until I got home at about 5:30 or so. So I put a blog up very quickly, thinking there might be something. Nothing much had happened up to that point, and one of the things I said in my blog on propquest.co.uk, where I normally do these things once a day, was that there's a chance that just about any direction from the UK, from sort of Scandinavia round through to Spain, would be in the right sort of direction for the typical things that we think in the weather world might contribute towards Sporadic. So what happens? About an hour later, an opening to Scandinavia. Very pleased. But we'll have a look at that right at the very end. I've downloaded very briefly a couple of charts to see what might be happening there. Anyway, let's press on. Some fundy modes. So this is really the deal. There's so many things. So sporadic E is at the top half here, and here you can see E's. E subscript S is the normal shorthand for writing sporadic E. And there'll be several of you new to amateur radio who have joined it recently, and this is all a big mystery, I'm sure, to some of you, and there may be some out there who haven't even worked sporadic E. Or heard it. You don't necessarily have to work it, but to hear it is quite interesting as well. So sporadic E lives up here. Now, up here in this instance means at about 110 kilometers above the ground. So that's a long way up. And some of the reasons why we think sporadic E happens where it does is because things happen down here in the bottom bit, in this big red ellipse, which is where the weather lives. And that's in the bottom 10 kilometers of the atmosphere. So here we've got 10 kilometers where weather happens, and above that, at 110 kilometers, is where sporadic E happens. So there has to be something connecting the two. And what we think is that wave motions propagate upwards, like vertical ripples from a pond, if you like. Think of it like that. And they can affect the patterns of atmospheric movement in the E's region. So that's the essence of it. And some of the things that we think could launch these ripples are things like mountain waves. Well, it's not where the sea crashes over the cliffs, but it's where the wind flow is disturbed over a mountain range. Say, like, for example, fairly close to home, but in the UK, say, the air coming from the west over the Atlantic gets moved up across the Pennines. And that can set up a bouncing motion downwind, so to speak. So mountain waves are meant to be able to propagate vertically upwards over great distances. Jet streams, these fast-flowing currents of air in the atmosphere at the height where aircraft fly, and where you see the wispy cirrus cloud. That wispy cirrus cloud, well, there's quite a bit of it up there today, but that's not associated with a jet stream. That's associated with an upper ridge pattern where it all gets contorted, but that's also a potential source for these ripple motions that go up there. Also an upper ridge, which is what we've got today. So this may be what's doing the deal today. And then thunderstorms are believed to have a role in things because of the turbulence at the top of a thunderstorm. You know, these big towering thunderclouds that go all the way up through the full depth of the atmosphere. When they reach the stable layer where the cirrus cloud lives, it's called the tropopause. It's where the top of the weather bit is. It's like punching a drum skin. And you get these thunderclouds pushing on the top of that, and that generates ripples that go up. All in all, there's a lot of sources for these things, and these things are called AGW. And what AGW means is atmospheric gravity waves. So it's not gravity changing, otherwise they'd be called gravitational waves. These are atmospheric gravity waves, and they're wave motions in the atmosphere where gravity is the restoring force. So that's what they are, and you'll see various articles and in the literature about things, and these atmospheric gravity waves everywhere. Just about anything in the atmosphere can make these things, but some of them seem to be particularly good at going all the way up to the E's region. So there's something to explore there. And then when they get there, they interact with things like the it just gets more complicated than that. I'm sorry, but the point is there are all sorts of winds up there in the neutral atmosphere, regardless of sporadic E. There's changes in the winds due to which side of the Earth faces the sun and which side gets the sun's energy and which doesn't, and it alters the wind flow, and you get in the mid-latitudes quite a strong signal from what's called the semi-diurnal tidal winds. And these are winds that change sort of twice a day, and they provide some influence on the times when we usually get sporadic E. So they're like windows of opportunity of sporadic E. And typically we think of them as happening twice a day in our world, but we'll have a look at that perhaps a little bit later on. So, things that will disturb it. What happens, they think, is that this wind shear produced by these semi-diurnal tides and these ripples coming up and mixing with those, we're all used in the amateur radio world of mixing signals together and getting a very complex waveform coming out. Well, in the atmosphere, you can get all sorts of wave motions that mix together and you produce a complex thing. These two things are capable of making some quite marked wind shear, which has the effect of moving meteor debris. So this is the new ingredient we can introduce to the discussion. It's not new to people who follow Sporadic E, because many people in the old days would book the first week of June off on holiday to stay at home and work Sporadic E, because that's when some very important meteor showers happen and tend to improve the chances a bit. However, the point is that if you have these winds, these tidal winds mixing with these winds, making a complex pattern, they have the effect of blowing this meteor debris about, which is ionized metallic debris from a meteor. So meteors, when you bite into them, you'll find there's a sort of magnesium, a silica iron, things like that. And these ions, as they burn up, they're particularly long lasting. So you've got a chance with the winds that are up there fluctuating about to move them before they are no longer ionized, and the recombination rate is particularly slow. So the end result is the wind shear theory of Sporadic E depends on having winds that move charged particles, the debris from meteors, through the Earth's magnetic field, and it's the state of that which is given by the K index or the KP index for a planetary value. But ideally for Sporadic E, you want to look at a local value in your part of Europe, say, but it'll be similar. So there you have the Sporadic E, wind shear theory of Sporadic E. So it depends upon moving charged particles, which is the debris from the meteors, through a magnetic field, and they suffer a deflection. And if the wind is blowing one way, these charged particles will be moved up or down. Let's say they go down. And the ones going with the wind from the other direction might be moved up. So it's a leap of faith, but it's pretty clear that you could get your meteor debris and bring it together into a narrower layer, which is a more intense layer of ionization, which is where you get your Sporadic E signals from. Once it gets that strong, I just saw one there for a minute. I thought I was going to be able to show it to you, but I can't. So once you get this to be dense enough, it will bring back a signal from, say, 50 megs, which it wouldn't normally do. And the fact that it only happens in very specific places is part of the reason why we call it sporadic. But it's both sporadic in placement and in terms of time when it happens. So it's all a bit of a faff trying to get to the bottom of any one thing as being the only thing you need to look at. In fact, it turns out you've got to be aware of all these things to say something about Sporadic E. So what we're going to talk about here is some ways of plotting ionoson data to see if that can help us, and also to combine everything into what I've called an ease probability index, which is also available on PropQuest, and that enables us to look for the hotspots where it might be worth thinking about Sporadic E signals coming from. So the one thing about Sporadic E signals, although weather patterns are fairly long-lasting, you know, you don't get a jet stream switching on and off. They tend to be very persistent and will move slowly across the sky, sort of thing. And what might be present in the morning opening, because the times of these tides that I mentioned kind of gives us a morning opening, sort of mid-morning, and it gives us a late afternoon, early evening. And these weather features on a map, like, say, a jet stream, will be one place on the morning opening and might have shifted a bit farther over for the afternoon one, but they'll be within reach. They'll still be in the right ballpark. So the fact that you had an opening in the morning is actually quite a good indicator that it's worth looking again in the evening if you've been one of the unlucky ones where you hear somebody on the local repeater or the local natter channel saying, "Oh, you should have seen the sporadic E earlier on." So anyway, it's worth looking in the second period. So let's have a look. So it's really a case of saying how these tidal winds can scoop up all this ionization as the meteors burn up and give us these very apparently random patches. But as we'll see, they're not that random. There is a reason why they happen where they happen. It's very hard to predict in advance, but it's much easier to say why it's possible that there could be this or that reason for them to being where they are once they've happened. So just to put that into a little schematic, here we have the meteors coming in, and they burn up at, there's kilometers up here on the y-axis here. So you've got 75 kilometers at the bottom, 100, 125, 150, and when meteors come in and burn up, this ionized material is up here, and it may well interact with these converging winds. So you've got winds going at in one direction at one height, and the wind shear means that you have them in the opposite, in the ideal world, the opposite direction just below, and that will converge the meteor debris. Now, one of the things about these tidal winds, these semi-diurnal tides, is that this zone where they come together, you have to take my word for it, tends to decrease in height with time. So the place where you'd expect to find the ease patch will slowly descend during, say, the morning opening period. So this kind of hints that given the right sort of stimulus, if you like, from the weather systems below, interacting with these tidal winds, you'll get some ease. Now, if you're the first one on the band to hear these ease, you're the lucky person, because this will be when they're at their highest point. So that means that you'll probably get a longer range for your ease, because once the layer comes down, your geometry will mean that the path distances are shorter. So get in at the beginning. So being aware of what's going on is really important. So anyway, here they come down here and come down here. And then what happens? Does it keep going? Does it, where do we finish? Well, where we finish is it tends to level off. So usually you'll find the first hints of sporadic E are at about 125 kilometers or above. So it's quite high up. But we end up, excuse me, quite often at around about 110 to 100. And then the longer you're doing this, the more material you're converging together, and it becomes really thick and intense here. But then something happens to mean that it doesn't go any lower. And what appears to happen is that as it gets lower, you're coming lower towards the thicker part of the atmosphere, where there's more material and the ionization recombines because there's more molecules for it to bump into. So sporadic E tends to get eroded on this lower edge, so it stops it going much lower than a certain height, usually about 95 to 100 kilometers. So that gives us a nice range for sporadic E between, I don't know, 130 odd and down to about 100. And that's the height range at which it can be. And where you find it tells you a little bit about how much longer you've got to go before the opening finishes, of course. The other thing is this tidal node descending doesn't care about whether it's made enough ionization clumped together to make sporadic E. It doesn't really know anything about that. So this tidal node, this suitable place, keeps moving down, and it could run ahead of the patch that it's made up here. The patch may not come down quite as quickly as this convergent node. So it could run ahead of itself, and the thing is left floating around at some intermediate height up here. So anyway, lot to look at. So what happens is during the day, you tend to find there's two dominant periods when you get sporadic E, and these almost probably do combine to show where your semi-diurnal descending tidal nodes reach the point where they've had longest to clear up all the debris and make it into a thick enough patch to be sporadic E. So do we need to know anything else about sporadic E? Well, you've got to ask the question, faced with this, if this is what happens, why isn't there sporadic E everywhere? Once you have it, why isn't it everywhere? Why is that not the case? Something makes it happen in one place, usually. And that something is this tickling from below by the weather systems generating these ripples going up. So that's what gives it a geographical sort of placement, if you like. And that's why you don't get sporadic E everywhere, because it needs these two things combined. It needs the tidal business bringing the stuff together on a large scale, and then it needs something to further modulate that, to make this sort of clumping together really focused, to give you these patches which are dense enough to work on whichever band. And it can go, I was just listening to stuff on the band has incidentally gone completely dead now. So where we had those lovely signals of S9 on the meter, nothing, zilch, just background band noise, S1/2. So it shows it's a switch on, switch off. Once you get past this window, there's nothing else you can do about it, because the ionization is well, we're over here on this one, is no longer strong enough. So there's your two openings. And there's also a diurnal tide. Well, there's others as well, but all of this combination means it's quite a dirty pattern. There's lots of periods where you could get interested in it, but these two are the main ones to look for. And then, of course, you get this lower height where you get more recombination taking place. So that's why the sporadic E sort of intensity tends to level off, and sooner or later, you don't have it any lower than that. Now the data is all around you on the ionoson returns, so you can get your FOEs, your frequency of your sporadic E patch, the critical frequency of straight up and down, you remember the sort of thing, and you can get your virtual height, which is the height at which it appears to come back from. And those two figures are in the columns down the side of most of the sporadic E plots you'll be familiar with, ionoson plots. So you can do something with that. You could actually put these things on a graph. You could look at the as you go through the day, you could look at the plot of the graph and see just how the height changes, for example. So you could say, let's have a nominal height, but a nominal height is a bit too crude when you think of this descending node, because it could be anything from 140 kilometers down to about 100, and that makes a world of difference in terms of the skip length. So when you actually plot a real ionoson to see what's happening, here's the sort of descending, there's a descending period here, there's another couple of smaller ones in here, and then another main one in here. So in the real world, it's actually quite complex. You've certainly got your two main descending nodes, but you can have the effect of other ones in there as well. And what's left over carries on from the previous night. So the blue colors on here represent ionization that's intense enough to be a sporadic E patch for 10 meter, 28 megahertz signals. And the greeny color is 6 meters. So we've just had this isn't today, but we've just had the equivalent of a 6 meter one in here. And you can on occasions get 4 meter ones and even 2 meter ones. So this is quite an interesting thing to be able to do, to be able to see where you are in this gradual descent. Notice the periods of maximum don't necessarily last that long. So it could be here, for example, this finite width of the green bit could be it's reached as low as it's going, but that's clearly not the case because it keeps going down more. So it could be the case that it's reached the point at which the depletion, when it recombines, is gradually eroding and lessening the intensity of it. So seeing some of this thing sort of plotted out like that is kind of cool. Or you could plot it like this as a color-coded thing. Here's the height up the side here, 80 kilometers down here, 150 up here, and this is the color-coded time, UTC time. And you can see on this one, there's a lot of purples extending out here. And this is the interesting thing about this. Look how as the intensity, this is FOEs along the bottom here. So the intensity of the E's patch, so how good it is, if you like, is quite sort of disparate here. It's all over the shop in terms of height, but it focuses as it gets more intense. It focuses on a fairly narrow layer as the intensity increases. So that's another useful thing to have in the back of your mind in terms of how sporadic E works. So in the morning session, we had some stuff in here, but it got to be this orangey colour for 10 o'clock, just about here, but the values weren't that good. It never got much above 4 or 5 megahertz for the FOEs. Whereas in the evening window, we were able to make it much better. So something changed. Either the forcing got stronger, you know, this convergent business, or the weather triggers were better, or there was more meteor debris coming in. All sorts of things can change it, but it's quite interesting to see how it works. So because there's so many things going on, I thought, well, let's see if we can combine it all together into a single index. And I've called this the E's probability index, the EPI. And I'm working on it. It's a long-term thing because there's loads of things which appear to have an impact on it. So what the EPI is, it isn't saying you will definitely get E's here or here. It's saying that the likelihood is greater in these areas where this index is higher. So on this map at the bottom here, you've got the shading changes to this grey-white colour, and that's where the factors all contribute and combine to make a strong indication that that's a place where it might happen. So here was an opening where I worked somebody over here in Italy, down on the coast here, south of Rome, and the path happened to put the point of refraction from the sporadic E patch over this piece here, right on the edge of one of the more intense areas. Anything even into the purple yellow border can be useful. So the index depends upon stuff to do with weather and stuff to do with other things. Oh dear, no. Well, the other things are things like the Earth's magnetic field, how much meteor debris you get in, and things like that. And the stuff to do with the weather were those things we saw at the bottom of that diagram, you know, how effective those things are. So I've capped the numbers at 100, and then we have this factor here which modifies them, takes them down or pushes them up a bit, and that means that we can have a little play with our weather things and then apply these corrections to them and see what it does for the chance of sporadic E. So thunderstorms and showers, well, they kind of aren't big players simply because thunderstorms tend to be very localized, tall turrets of cloud. They don't necessarily last very long, so they may not have long enough to generate these ripply bits that go up to the E's layer. You know, they might have decayed before they've generated enough to do that. What's happening in the stratosphere could filter all this stuff going up and act as a block. Anyway, let's press on and have a look and see what we can do with this thing. Well, one of the things is on the PropQuest, this propquest.co.uk website that I've been running for quite a number of years now, kindly programmed by a colleague of mine at work, and it uses these ideas to put together what the weather map looks like that might be of interest. So the green shading are the jet streams, and if it goes yellow, it means the jet stream is particularly strong. Now, the thin black lines you see here are the equivalent of the isobars, but on an upper air map. So that's how we can see what the pattern looks like. And where they're close together, in the normal way, you would expect the jet stream to be a bit stronger. So you can see how that works. But patterns like this, they're not static. It's like ripples, it's like ripples, waves on the sea. And these patterns are moving. And sometimes they move to our advantage, sometimes they don't. And where they move a lot, we have these red lines which show where the value is lowering. So it's like increasingly low pressure. The pressure's falling. And where they're in a blue is where the contours are increasing. So it's a rising picture. So falling here ahead of a front and rising behind it. And the movement of these bits is a very sort of potentially significant thing in terms of creating turbulence. These orangey blobs are thunderstorms, and the whole map shows you in general where things might be of interest, especially if it's within. Can you see these two black circles here? They're not exact circles because of the map projection. That's why it's a little bit thicker at the bottom than the top. But these circles show an ideal range of distances where the geometry would be right to find a jet stream, and hence, if there's stuff going on in a big way in between these two black lines, then it's a good chance that you might see some sporadic E there. Now remember this, because here you've got two black lines that come in through here. So from here, going through here, you'd be doing very well to, if that's the midpoint, you'd be doing very well to reach up to here or up to here, with that as a refraction point. We'll come back to that. So relative vorticity, it's the amount of spin. So that also creates turbulence. So we're looking at things, remember, to see what makes all these wobbles going up to the E region. And where you get a sharp edge of wind speed change, that can produce a marked ribbon of vorticity, and that's believed to potentially be of interest. So although the jet streams may be weak, like this one over Spain, there is a very intense area of vorticity there, of spin in the atmosphere. So, if you saw a whirlpool in the river, you'd think that would be a pretty turbulent place. And you've got to imagine that if you, say, dropped a broom handle in a stream from a bridge across the flow of the stream, and it floated off down the stream, the bit in the middle of the river where the current was stronger would go quicker. So it would impart spin on the broom handle. So it would have spin given to it. And this sort of vorticity measurement is a way of seeing how much spin is being put into the deal. And that could be important. So the time of the year, whether you're going over mountains or not, what the meteor input looks like, all of these other things, the semi-diurnal tide, loads and loads of stuff. Can't possibly take it all in on any given day, but if you combine it in this EPI, you never know. You could plot it on a map and look, you get these wonderful shapes and patterns, which could give you a guide as to where things might be. So here was a QSO across here, and here was the IS0, and there was a little patch in this radial ring bit. So, whoops. So, it's got some merit. I won't say it's nailed all of the issues, but it's certainly something which I'll continue to tinker about with, just to try and find out why one bit. So you say, well, okay, this was a QSO, so why wasn't there one through this bit? Why weren't there people having QSOs across here? What's the deal there? So there's a lot still to be done, but I think it's got some promise. And then if you look for, on that particular day, the nearest eye on the sun is in northeastern Spain. You can see again, you've got this signature where the sporadic E, the FOE's increases, look, goes all the way up to 12 megs here. That's a tremendously strong opening. And that gets the colour donated for 4 metre signals. So that's quite cool. And you can see how it converges as it gets stronger and gets narrower and so on. So it's quite an interesting thing, sporadic E. It's got structure and it's got a behaviour pattern that every time you get a good one, it looks like this. It goes out in this strong, elongated, narrow, very narrow layer. And this is quite striking, isn't it? So you've got these descending nodes here, and then you get the peaks somewhere towards the bottom, or because of some other feature which isn't exactly clear. But look, very striking descending nodes. So you can get some quite obvious features of sporadic E, which you can plot on an ionoson. So whoever would have thought it? You know, all those other lines you see on ionosons, if you look at them during the whole day. So when you go online and look at an ionoson as a fixed item online, you tend to look at one individual time. You look at the ionoson at a certain time. But a lot of the interest for sporadic E comes from having a plot of the changes over a period of time to see what the history of it is and how these things fit in. And there is a definite sort of signal here from these things, how it converges to a narrow layer. So here we've got another one where I worked, I didn't, but the guys in the States worked down into the Caribbean from the northeastern states, and that went on this edge of an intense patch of the EPI, and that may well have been a vorticity thing. It might well have been something that, because you get this on the edge of a jet stream, you get this extra spin value. That was what was generating the sporadic E. Whereas this bit, which was a more intense reason for putting it there, didn't do the goods, but this bit did, because the edge was quite sharp and marked. Who knows? But it did come up with a fit, and there are others where it seems to either be in a pattern or on the edge of a pattern. So what we're looking at is exploration using amateur logs to try and find out if there's anything we can see that gives us a clue as to which bit of a pattern like this might be important, and whether some of the factors, the adjustments, are right. You know, we may not have quite figured it right, because the Earth's magnetic field is horizontal at the equator, so you don't get sporadic E there. You need to have a slight tilt in it for this to work. Anyway, is there some dependence there which needs to be more marked? Do some of the other parameters need to be increased? Is the jet stream speed more important than the change in speed? Loads of things still to test. But it's fascinating that we now have the tools that enable us to do it. So you can look at this as an early season a couple of years back, and you can plot, for example, what the FOEs is. And here are a few occasions during the early part of a season in February when you wouldn't expect much, and you still get the odd isolated event going up to 6 meters. This green line here just gets into 6 meters at point B and at point A. So who knew in February, you know, here you've got nothing at all. So what's going on there? Well, in A, you're on the edge of a jet stream. So that could be this spin thing that I talked about, this putting the broomstick in the stream, sort of spinning going on, making something worth seeing. This one, where there's nothing at all happening, not even a faint residual one, is right in the middle of an upper high. No wind at all, no turbulence, everything's static, stable, no turbulence, no little ripply bits going up. And here you have a strongest signal from what I think is this advancing contrast coming down across Spain, and you've got this beginning of a jet stream coming down across there. So there's all sorts of things where we're looking at stuff and trying to find out how these links might work better. So there's evidence of different slopes. So is it possibly a split node here, or is that all one for the evening one, a late evening one? But anywhere where you see something sloping down is worth looking at. And then you get these very isolated things going on. This is the 1st of February, not when you'd normally expect E's. So just sprung up there to nearly 7.5 megs, which is quite interesting. And here you can see a satellite picture of roughly that area where in this is in May. So I'm going to move something across on the screen here so I can see what's going on. Mountain wave activity could be causing some turbulence over the Pyrenees. The wind is coming from here, going down to the south across the Pyrenees. And here you then have a long afternoon with these long, slow descending nodes, and again going up to nearly 7 megs. This is mid-February. So don't rule out E's just because it's not the main season. I don't suppose anybody was on checking for it in the middle of February, but that certainly would make you think that possibly you shouldn't rule it out at any time of the year. But it's obviously much less frequent than in the summer. And here you can see the effect of some mountain waves. You see these striations here. So there's mountain wave clouds being generated downrange of the Pyrenees here. So that could be a reason for it. Nothing much going on here. It just didn't get going at all, really, did it? It just briefly managed something on 10 meters, but nothing very much going on. And here we've got high pressure, so you've got nothing at all, no flow, nothing of interest, and just got some snow on the Pyrenees there. So then I thought, well, I'll have a look and see if there's any parameters that could show a trend, and plotting different things against the FOEs is sometimes an exercise that's worth doing. May not always be, but this is work in progress, and this is where we're going with it. Something interesting about this station in northeast Spain, Roquetas, you can see that where you get stronger, this is the 300 millibar jet stream speed, and the color coding here is how strong the ease opening is. And you can see that for some of these high values here, from this direction, the direction is along here. So we've got north here coming around to east, south, southwest, west, northwest, and so on. Right, so it turns out that the wind coming this direction gets disturbed by the Pyrenees and gives some stronger signals. And this one's quite good. It's got quite a bunch of lime green and even the odd red one in here coming from this direction. So these two mountain ranges either side of this eye on the sun would appear to be quite useful for generating mountain waves and sporadic E nearby. And very little happens out over the sea here, where it's fairly flat, unless you get a weather front moving through it. Just as a guide, if you have a study over a long period of time, you'll get a big chunk of E's which in this early season don't even reach 10 meters. 42% do. And then just 2% get up to 2 meters. And a tiny, minuscule, vanishingly small amount reaches 4 meters. So these upper band openings are very rare, really. On the 11th of March, the prediction, this lower bit is our E's probability thing. Big prediction going on here, lots of colours going on here. And then you can see this red one here picked up a very strong signal. A measurement from the ionoson found the sporadic E in there had reached up to 4 meters. So I'm doing things where I'm looking at various weather things. I won't go into boring you with the details of that. This is trying to figure out which of those many things on that image I showed at the beginning might be important. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to keep looking, because sooner or later some of these things will reveal their hand as to what's happening next and which things we should concentrate. I don't for 1 minute think we've got necessarily all of the right ingredients here, or not in the right quantities. So we've got a lot of work to do still, and you've got a lot of work to do, because a lot of what happens next is because of logs that come from you working folk and submitting your logs to the various DX clusters and things like that, so I can become aware of them. So while we were talking earlier on, I was working, while David was talking earlier on and showing you mystery objects, I was working a couple of stations in Scandinavia. So these were halfway up the west coast of Norway and halfway up the Gulf of Bothnia in Sweden. And there's me there, and I'm working both of those. And you can see it's just on the edge. The critical point is just on the edge of this slightly enhanced shading. Now the colours aren't strong because we're not quite in the main season. So maybe I've got to ramp up the seasonal shading a little bit. But nonetheless, it fits with the edge of a jet stream sort of approach. And if you look at where all of these paths cross in this top left-hand map, you'll see there's a focal point here this evening, which correlates pretty well with where this midpoint of the path was. So that's kind of neat, isn't it? So it looks as though what we've got here is the edge of a jet stream. This is the axis of the upper ridge. See this pattern here, the faint black lines go up and then down here. And here's the axis of the upper ridge, and the upper ridge is moving through this region. And you get a lot of turbulence on the axis of the upper ridge, and just on the inside of the jet stream, there's a lot of extra vorticity as well. So that's brand new sort of hot poop straight out of the loudspeaker this evening, and it's sort of interesting that when you look at real-time events, it's a very illuminating thing, which shows the value of having logs submitted to these various clusters. And there are many others. There are many that are run by all sorts of wonderful folk, and I look at many of them, and these show you a lot about where the current events are going on. And this is it's a tick in the box, both for amateurs who bother to submit their logs, but also for adding yet another piece of ammunition to the search for what we could use to predict where E's might be found in the future, not just now, but in the future. And on the text for the Sporadic E blog, I'll just tell you if you sorry, so anyway, I wrote this at about 5:30 because I was late getting back from work. I said a more interesting feature is the jet stream from Scandinavia south across France into eastern Spain. Scandinavia, across France into eastern Spain, if you look at the red arrow in this bottom left picture. This is at the right sort of distance between the black lines. Here's our black lines going around here. 4 paths round the compass from Scandinavia, because you've got the green strong jet stream winds here, and this incidentally, look at this bit here, it's jet streams blowing across mountains. Well, that's good, because you've got jet streams and you've got wind shear on the edge of it, so vorticity and stuff, and you've got an upper ridge, and you've got mountain gravity waves. So what's not to like about that direction? So and then I said black lines, distance between the black lines for paths round the compass from Scandinavia round to Eastern Europe and south to Iberia, to Spain and Portugal. So any path could have happened. The fact that it was this one probably meant there were more ingredients there working in favour of that direction than perhaps in some of these others. But that's not to say there weren't paths available here, but people just didn't point in that direction. So it's all good, isn't it? It's quite fascinating how these things can sort of give you hope that it's worth pursuing it, because with the help of your logs and people working these stations, it really does become quite a good quest, doesn't it? So PropQuest, www.propquest.co.uk will be the site to go on, and this map that you can fill in here, you can fill in your own QSOs on here. So whoops. So you just enter your call sign and locator in the top there, and then you enter the distance station, and then you click a little dot here to say which band you're on. You press go and you move it around. If the map doesn't come straight away, just slide it across the screen about a bit. There's a problem with it going over the meridian. We'll have to look into that. Yeah, so you can have a look and see how any of the paths that you work on Sporadic E tie up with these hotspot areas. So there we are. So what I'll do now is just say thank you to everybody who contributes. You know, a lot of people do. Over the years, many hundreds and thousands of people have put logs into various clusters and groups. So it's a real asset for amateur radio to have that collective sort of grouping of data, and very valuable, as are the ionosondes. You know, we couldn't make head and tail of this without seeing what the ionosondes are showing, and the Lowell digisondes managed on a server in the States are very valuable for this sort of thing. As it happens, I use dxmaps.com, but there are many other online clusters as well, and they're all extremely good and should be supported. And also my colleague Dan Holly, who did the programming of the website, PropQuest, and WeatherQuest for hosting the server, it's all good. So there's a lot of people all pulling together to try and make these things happen, and it's all volunteer effort. So from our point of view, from the amateur community, this is you contributing to something that helps you in the end find out more about Sporadic. So there we are. That's, I think, plenty enough. You've all earned a lie down and a cup of tea.
I think you're the one who needs that, aren't you, Jim, after quite a long day. Thank you ever so much. As always, explaining quite a difficult subject in a ways that we can all understand, and we really appreciate it. I had lots of compliments already, and I've got a few questions. But if you have a question for Jim about this, or dare I say even the weather, but probably not the weather, the propagation, or related, but particularly Sporadic, or you've got any comments or experiences that you've had, even recent ones maybe, and as Jim said, he's had some good contacts tonight, then you know what to do. Just put them onto BATC or Facebook, and we'll read them to Jim in a moment. Now, someone who's done just that is made a comment. That is actually, it was Paul G3VPT, who says, in the 1960s I worked ZB2 VHF using AM from my car when on holiday in Dorset, and he said, he has a PS, it was on AM 70.26 megs, so it's 4 meters, isn't it, from a quarter wave whip on the car. What do you think about that, Jim?
Brilliant. Yeah, pushing the boundaries of Sporadic there, Paul. One of the things that's come out in all this, that signal that I played to you early on, was so loud that I get the feeling I could have put a screwdriver in the aerial socket and you'd have still heard it. So don't feel that you necessarily need to have massive, big beta arrays. For a multi-hop path, remember you've got losses all along the way, and therefore these big arrayed beams and things do help. But for a single hop Sporadic contact, you'd be amazed what you can use and get some really good signals. And yeah, that's cracking stuff, Paul. And that's exactly the right sort of distance for a Sporadic thing. What did I hear the other day? On 10 meters, Western Sahara was on Sporadic probably the other evening. So anywhere sort of northwest Africa, southern Spain, Iberia, the Balearics, perfect distance. Yeah, good stuff, Paul. AM, hey, wow.
Those are the days, weren't they? Well, they could still be the days, of course. Paul G4XBT stroke SQ1NXQ says, evening, Jim. Just listened on 6 meters. Heard a signal, only someone tuning up, but first time this year. Hope you're well. So yeah, it's just starting then, you think, is it?
Yeah, early May. For folk who are on CW and sideband, it tends to be either very late April or very early May. You start to get little flickers, and they don't last long. You've got to be almost in the shack at the time. If I'm sitting here working or doing something else, I'll often have the rig tuned to 50095 because that's often used as a calling frequency, and you can see what's happening because you have a pan adapter on most rigs nowadays. But early May is about the time to start if you're interested. Otherwise, you just wait for somebody to come up on a local natter band or the repeater and say, oh, you know, Sporadic on so-and-so at the moment. But the folk using FT8 will have been doing this for quite a time. You know, there will have been paths. And also, actually, something I didn't mention, because it's not my expertise, is that the crossover between the southern, because remember, we have our summer Sporadic season. In the southern hemisphere, they have a winter sporadic E-season. Well, our winter is their summer. So they have their sporadic E-season during our winter months. And at the crossover at both ends, you often get periods where TEP, I don't know if you've heard of that, David, but this thing called trans-equatorial propagation.
No,
and that tends to be something that joins the two hemispheres together in a way similar to sporadic E, but there's a lot of discussion about how it actually happens. It sort of is believed that it goes up to the F layer and then does a caudal hop across the equator and comes back down the other side. Sometimes it appears to have a bit of a boost with some ease at either end. Sometimes, who knows? But there's many people who are much better versed in trans-equatorial propagation than I am, and it's a fascinating subject as well. And the folk on digital modes have been using TEP quite a lot in the last 2 or 3 weeks to work ZS, so South Africa, on VHF. So well, 6 meters, 10 meters, that sort of thing. And I think somebody did it on 2 meters the other day. So there's all these nice, sort of interesting exotic modes going on.
Thank you. I did scribble, one of the notes that I scribbled, questions for you, is that are you more likely to hear this using some modes than others?
Well, it's a strength of signal deal, really. So low noise signal modes. So the digital modes are very good for putting a signal together out of very noisy conditions. So FT8 and those sorts of modes tend to be particularly effective. And then in terms of strength of ease patch that you need, you come up to CW, which is the next thing, and then you need sideband. But very often, if it's strong enough for CW, it's also strong enough for sideband. So if you hear a CW signal on the bottom of the band on 6 meters, and you're not a CW person, I can't believe there's people out there like that, but if you're not, then what you want to do is tune up to the sideband end, and you'll find probably plentiful sideband signals up there as well. So once the band is open, it tends to do very well for both modes. But digital modes will nearly always steal the drop on the others, just because they're very good at weaker marginal signal states.
Okay, Jim, thank you. I've got a question now on BATC from Tony M0TDK, who asks, would using a different map projection, such as a spherical projection, make things easier to understand?
Yeah, quite possibly. One of the reasons for using a projection a bit like we're doing at the moment, I have experimented with, or rather we have at work, experimented with a spherical one and doing it on a globe and spinning the globe, a bit like you see for these programs where you track satellites and things. That's quite handy as well, but you tend not to see the whole picture in one. The other thing, a lot of the clusters tend to plot on projections of the sort that we're using, not necessarily exactly the same, but it's easier to co-locate signals from the clusters and do a very quick visual sort of comparison, say, oh yeah, that's what's going on there. But we're not with the final projection choices yet. I'm sure there'll be some work done, because we've still got to fix this issue, Tony, with the map shifting on the meridian, and Google made some sort of change with how they process the map codings, which I'm going to have to get to work on. Got some issues coming up soon, because the programmer who did a lot of this good work is going to a different job, so won't have so much access, and that means going to have to try and find some other method of updating things, but that'll all come to good, I'm sure. So yeah, but good thoughts, Tony, and I'm sure we'll explore other avenues when we see what's happening. One of the things I'll say right now, if you were, say, it's worth looking early in the mornings on 10 meters, say, for paths that go to the northeast from here, across on 10 meters to the far east. Now, it may be FOF2, or it may be multi-hop E's, and at the beginning of the season on sporadic E, you do sometimes find quite a few of those. You got to remember that the weather patterns change from spring to summer, and the positions of the jet streams change. So you don't always get the same prospects for working particular parts of the world on Sporadic E right through the year. It's not like a season that switches on and then everything is there. You'll find that Caribbean paths, for example, are in the early part of the season, and the weather patterns aren't quite so favourable at the far end in the late summer or in the high summer. So there's things that happen because of weather changes that we need to have some acknowledgement of, but haven't quite bottomed that one out yet. But it'll be in the user guide to Sporadic E eventually when I've finished.
Well, there's always work to do, I guess, with this. I'm going to go to another question, but before that, this is a call out really for Ralph, 2M0RHT, because I know there was a good question and comments there from you, Ralph, but it's disappeared. And I haven't got it on my computer in front of me, and Tammy's checked on hers as well, and it's literally the comments disappeared. Maybe you've deleted it for good reason, but if you haven't, maybe you can pop it back there or something like that fairly quickly.
In honour of Ralph.
There we go. Look, Jim, look, Ralph, there we are. GMDX. So if you can put that back or something, Ralph, because we're a bit confused. I was about to read it and it's gone. And another question, though, that we have got, I think, although is that the one I was going to read? I think it was. It was, actually. It was that. I thought, well, I'm sure it was there a moment ago. Anyway, Ralph, maybe if you've got those comments to put back, you can let us know. The E openings, I mean, is there any particular length of time that they are open, or is this all not understood yet fully, and is it random?
Well, the funny thing is, David, we all have this. Over the years, people have pushed forward this notion that you tend to get two openings, one in the morning and then another one that may repeat late afternoon, early evening. So when we say an opening, we're kind of talking about an opening window when ease is possible. And it's all about this descending curve of the semi-diurnal tide thing. So within that, you can get openings within that window to different parts of Europe. Won't always be to the same place. So an opening to the SMs that we just had lasted about 20 minutes and then they disappeared and they've not been seen since. Now, when you're in the high season, what sometimes happens is you get an opening to the east, and then as the tidal zone moves across, people say, well, the ease patch shot across to so-and-so. It probably wasn't the ease patch moving across to so-and-so. It was the fact that this window of opportunity of the tidal node picked up a place farther across in the west. So it might be Eastern Europe, somewhere over Poole in Poland, say, to begin with. And then as the Earth turns a bit more, the more favourable place where this curve is coming down will open up a path to the Balearics, or T'other Poole will be talking to Gibraltar and ZB2. So it appears to translate across the map of Europe from east to west within that window. So for an individual station, it may not last long. It may be about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. So that's why Sporadic E, CW on sideband on any mode, tends to be quite quick working. You don't have time for long rag chews and many overs and all the rest of it. It's just 599, locate a square, possibly a name, and that's it. And then the other person sends back the same thing, and that's you done. Because the chances are this patch, this very finely balanced patch, is only there for a short period of time. And I'm reminded of I don't know if you know Whitby at all on the Yorkshire coast, David, but I'm reminded of when you sit on the end of the pier at Whitby and look inland up the valley there. What you see is the traffic coming down the hill into the town from off the top of the North York Moors, and they come down the hill, and just at a certain time, at a certain point, the sunlight gets reflected off the car windscreen, and you see this flash of light on the top of the hill, and that's this moment in time when it's an exact alignment for you to see the sunlight reflected from the car windscreen. Now, I kind of feel Sporadic E is operating a bit like that. It's not a reflection, it's probably a refraction, but it's a moment in time when the pattern's right. But it is changing, so it's not stationary. It's changing because this forcing is moving down. There are winds moving things around. The whole thing is in a state of flux, so you shouldn't necessarily expect the geometry to be right for huge long overs. But a given opening, I've known in the peak of the season, it can last off and on to one place or another for virtually the whole day, from the middle of the morning till mid-evening, if not beyond. But on the other hand, at the early part of the season, at the ends of the season, openings maybe only 10 minutes, maybe just one QSO, 5 minutes or less. So it's quite a challenge.
Yeah, indeed. Well, and just on that note, we have just got a revised entry from Ralph. He said something went wrong on his system. And he says, Jim noted several times this evening during his excellent lecture that we think my thoughts were about theory versus fact or proven science. Does Jim think we will ever have fact rather than theory regarding sporadic E rather than forecast? Forgive me, Jim, like the weather forecast. In other words, he says at the bottom as a PS, will we ever understand nature? It's a deep question for you to finish on.
Another swig of the tea for that one. Well, in terms of forecasts, they're usually based on some sort of science underneath. So forecasting the weather is based on a science of atmospheric physics. So there is this understanding of how the atmosphere works. One of the problems with that is that you don't measure absolutely everything to get all of your starting conditions. So there are uncertainties in the outcome because of the imprecise nature of your starting conditions. Same is true of sporadic E, I guess, Ralph, in a way. A lot of the professional researchers understand fairly well many of the aspects of what they think controls and affects how sporadic E works. It's not a total known, because people, like in all branches of science, there are weaknesses and there are bits which are less certain, but overall people are moderately content with where we are, and it fits most of the description. But you can upturn even quite well established and very important fundamental laws of physics with new discoveries from, as they say, the Large Hadron Collider or the Large Hadron Collider. And the bottom line is that it's such a difficult subject. We amateurs, because we don't work in ionospheric physics, don't know this full. I don't know the full background to how this all works. I know what I've read in papers, and I know what the professional researchers in this are feeling. I couldn't explain it to you because I'm not that deeply involved in physics and the science and mathematics of how that's calculated. But there's been a lot of work done, and the observational evidence kind of fits, but not yet in terms of the one of the things that we have with sporadic E in the amateur world is we have a big advantage of distributed observing networks. So we have a lot of people out there observing in many places. What tends to happen with the physical sciences and research sites is you get some very advanced telescopes and radio telescopes and ionospheric physics research enterprises which are fixed in location and possibly don't have such a widespread view of it. So we steal a little bit of a march by being able to get a more sort of generic overview of things, but it's not very detailed. It's not particularly high resolution. So there's a great, the one thing that you find, Ralph, is there's this great collaboration between amateurs and the professional scientists, because we can learn from them, and in the same way they can be interested in what we're discovering as well, because that could fit or not with their physics proposals as to how it works, and that could help them to reinforce their ideas or maybe look at something else. And there's a group called HAMSCI, SCI, which is largely driven by a wonderful group over in America who combined professional research with the scientific community running the big radio telescopes and academic institutions with the amateur population. And there are a lot of those folk in these research institutions that are also amateurs. And there's this great spillover between ham sci and the professional researchers. And we don't probably perhaps realise adequately enough how important it is to have those links, that sort of handshake between the amateur world and the professional scientists in this, because we benefit a lot in terms of our understanding of how it happens. But ultimately, because we don't know exactly everything that happens and the magnitudes and how it works, and it's right, you know, it's difficult to measure weather everywhere. Well, you couldn't afford to. And it's difficult for me to measure enough weather in my garden to represent exactly everything that's happening out there. You imagine trying to do the same thing 110 kilometres above the ground. It's going to take ages to come up with enough evidence and science that will allow you to properly resolve these issues. But we're getting so much further on, and I do think things have advanced a lot. But there's still a little bit of the lap of the gods about it, Ralph. So makes it worth having a speculative moment in the shack. Here's the final thing. If you're in any doubt about Sporadic, and people do work Sporadic from Scotland, so it can be done. You're not out of the firing line up there. But if you want to work Sporadic, the one thing you can do to improve your chances, and this applies anywhere in the mid-latitudes, is when you get, if you're still working or if you're retired, you can choose when, but basically when you come home or come in for tea and you're finished cutting the grass or whatever, instead of going and having your meal, in the summer months, switch the shack on, have a listen on 6 meters at tea time. Sort of any time from 5 o'clock in the afternoon, late afternoon, evening, until about 7 o'clock. That magic 2-hour window between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock. You switch 6 meters on, and I guarantee you, by the end of this year, you'll have heard or worked or both Sporadic.
A great way to finish on there, Jim. Yeah, I've heard of that, and that's maybe one of the other reasons it's called the Magic Band, because it has so many things about it. But thank you very much. By the way, Ralph is not convinced about one thing you've said tonight. He did say, he has put on there, T, 4 exclamation marks, never. That's what he said. But he does say, thank you, Jim, excellent. You know more than I will ever know. He's an amateur. That's what he says. And then Paul, G4XBT, says, thanks for your very interesting talk, as usual. And that goes for all of us, Jim. We're very lucky to have you, very, very fortunate to have you in our club, both for what you do for us, but also for the wider amateur community. And long may that continue. Thank you ever so much for tonight's talk as well.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, David.
Thanks very much, Jim. There we are, and that almost finishes tonight's NARC Live. Fascinating night. Don't forget to try 6 meters. Even I might ever go on that and put 6 meters on tomorrow and see what I get between 5 and 7. I might actually do that. I'll let you know, Jim. Just before we go then, just to remind us of what's happening this week at the club. We've got Saturday, we've got the condensed sked on 7.123 megahertz at 10 o'clock. On Sunday at 7 o'clock in the evening, GB2RS on GB3NB, the news service from the RSGB. On Monday at 7:30, the Monday Night Net on GB3NB. And then at 8 o'clock, the 80 meter CW net on 3.543 megahertz. Also at 8 o'clock, that RSGB Tonight at 8 on designing circuit boards. And then next Wednesday, a week tonight, April the 17th, we'll be meeting at CNS for a social and Bright Sparks for young members.
April 17th?
Did I say that? May. I meant May, sorry. No, I don't mean that at all, do I?
17th?
No, sorry about that. That's a bit of my script that's...
It's the 15th.
Sorry, May the 15th.
May the 15th.
May the 15th be with you. We'll hope to see lots of you at the school next Wednesday. Sorry about that. I told you we're a bit out of practice. We'll get right for next time. So we'll see you here in 2 weeks' time for NARC Live. In the meantime, don't forget to keep in touch. Send your stories, your pictures and things. We'd love to share them with everybody. But from Tammy M0TC...
Bye-bye.
And from me for tonight, goodbye. Bye-bye.